So I don't know about y'all, unless you comment and tell me, but I tend to go through phases when it comes to consuming things like manga, comics, anime, whatever, where I will either revisit something that I liked that inspired me partially to get into that type of media in the first place, and be reinvigorated to go check out more of it, or I'll find something new while just, desperately looking for something to care about that blows me away so much that I need more. I just start scrubbing through the whole history of the medium, trying to figure out what influenced this. What else could have been as good as this now is? I kind of got a 1-2 punch of that in the last couple of weeks when it comes to manga, because I found out that Shaman King is available to read for free if you have Amazon Prime, which I do. I also have an Amazon Associates link, so if you buy anything on Amazon, use that link in the description that I never remember to promote. I get paid for that. Anyway, there's not a ton of good manga on there. You've got like The Drops of God and Shaman King. That's like the cool stuff that they have available for free on Amazon Prime. And I never finished Shaman King. I was reading it in the American version of Shonen Jump, monthly Shonen Jump, as it was releasing in the United States back when manga was first really becoming a known quantity in the United States, largely because of Shonen Jump, making a big push towards middle schoolers like I was at the time, introducing us to stuff like Naruto, Shaman King, One Piece, eventually Bleach, all of that through the popularity of Dragon Ball Z, and all of that through the popularity of like Dragon Ball Z and Yu-Gi-Oh!, which were, massively huge TV franchises that were always on the cover of these magazines. The first issue I had of Monthly Shonen Jump was actually the one that introduced Shaman King, issue number 3. It had the first chapter, it had Yo on the cover. They had a really odd way of introducing manga to the US, where each issue they would introduce another manga until they reached a certain amount, but they never had as many as they should have, considering it only came out once a month, and they would only put like 1 or 2 chapters of each manga in there, so it was nowhere near the value proposition of Weekly Shonen Jump, which is the size of a phone book and comes out every single week. And so the stories all felt just grindingly slow back then. It's hard to overstate how important simultaneous publishing is to making manga, especially stuff that's only like 20 pages at a time, something that you can stay excited about long term. I've read the first 8 volumes now of Shaman King through Kindle, and that's substantially farther than I had ever gotten as a kid. And I'm sure I was reading Shaman King for over a year, but it was less than 3 volumes of the story that I ever experienced. So, from volume 4 on, everything has been totally new to me. And that manga, I'll have more to say about it later. I'm not going to talk about it extensively in this video because it is super long, and I've got other stuff that I'm excited to talk about. Because Shaman King is so long, and I didn't want to be uninterrupted reading it for, 36 volumes across however many weeks that's going to take, I wanted to check out some other manga, and so I started looking at some websites where you can read manga online for free. Just use Google if you want to find those. And my methodology for trying to find something I'm going to enjoy tends to be to just go through pages and pages of whatever I see on websites that list like, newest releases or most popular, and I'll just, anything that looks interesting to me at all, I'll open it up in a new tab and just try to read it until I lose interest, basically. And the first manga that really caught my attention and compelled me to read all of what was available is a brand new series, just started publishing on Shonen Jump Plus, which is their internet manga app. Usually on Jump Plus, the first 3 chapters and latest 3 chapters of whatever manga they have are free. So right now, because Astro Baby is only 3 chapters as of me recording this, it's all free on Shonen Jump Plus. Of course, you can also find it in other places. I was drawn to this initially because I had to see if it was connected in some way to Astro Boy. And immediately it starts off very hard edge. There's a guy eating a lady on like the first pages. He's got this weird, creepily normal look in his face while he's doing it. And then we learn about this remote town in the northern part of the farthest peninsula where apparently a meteor struck down and just like turned a bunch of people into cannibals. Kind of like a zombie situation. You know, this has been cordoned off, so it's like we're going to go in there, we're going to take care of this problem. But as they're doing the exposition and introducing main characters, I was just struck by how unique the artwork is for this manga, where it starts off having that sort of photorealistic, almost, you know, as manga goes. It's very realistic style, but then it gets incredibly cartoony and expressive, where we're introducing, like, this is just a totally different art style right here for this newscaster lady. It's just every panel has its own energy in a way that I rarely see in manga. There's not a lot of artists. Well, I mean, I guess manga is kind of known for going super deformed, going between these different styles, especially manga from like the early 2000s. But I can't think of many that have so much subtlety and so many different layers of different types of styles, where it's like there are very serious expressions, there are less serious expressions that are still expressed in a very realistic way, and then there are designs that are just strange, you know, characters who just have weird faces. There's total breaks in the art style. This scene, it suddenly looks like Astro Boy. So yeah, everything about this just kept me excited as I was reading it, and every beat of the story, like, I'm not reading what I'm showing you out loud, so you know, you can just see the cool expressive artwork if you're looking at the screen right now and not just treating this as a podcast. But the artwork, as cool as it is, like, what the characters are saying, what they talk about is equally interesting. And even though there's a lot of just kind of exposition and sort of normal conversation going on here, the content of the conversation, the content of who these characters are, is intriguing. Because this story starts off, the main character, he is from the town where the cannibals have gone rampant, and he escaped from it as a child, but he's part of this squad that's going to go back in and try to solve the issue, I guess, by way of violence, it seems, is the intent. Like, they're just going in there to murder everybody. But his plan is to go in there and rescue this woman that he has had a crush on since he was a kid. He knows that she's pregnant with someone else's baby. She's an older woman. She's just a total MILF. She's the cutest character design in the universe, by the way. But he's gone back into this town specifically to seek out this woman and, you know, confess to her and bring her out of there. But things don't go as planned, and I really don't want to spoil where this chapter goes. I mean, you can tell that it's going to get violent, it's going to get crazy, but it's really the constant twisting and turning, even just in what I've shown you so far. Again, it's harder to tell what the plot twists are because I'm not reading you the dialogue, but if you experience it in order, you're constantly learning things that change the way you see the story as it's going. And it feels really unpredictable right up through the end of the first chapter, even though it's playing into some very common tropes. And I've got a video I wrote about these tropes. It's talking about this manga, but also comparing it to the likes of Attack on Titan, Kimetsu no Yaiba, just all of the really popular shows that have come out recently that have a strong focus on cannibal characters and also similar events that transpire early in their story to kick off things. I think this manga has the potential to be as popular as some of those, you know, really successful ones, especially if this were to get a good-looking anime adaptation. Just the character designs are so good, the artwork is so expressive, and it's so fun. There's 3 chapters, and it's just been non-stop crazy stuff, crazy ideas. Again, I don't want to go too far into showing you the stuff because the spoilers, but I highly recommend this manga, and reading it, again, it being only 3 chapters, it left me starved for more right away. So I was like, who did this? Who wrote this? And that was what led me to Soloist in a Cage. Now, this is a 3-volume complete manga. This comes from the same author, Moriya Shiro. I adored this manga. This is one of those where, first image, prison city. Just this, like, Judge Dredd style, Omega oppressive, bleak, super city that's a giant prison, walled off. And, God, this artwork is just incredible. Like, Tsutomu Nihei level of detail going on with just the most fun character designs. It's just rare that a manga that has, again, this level of detail, this level of realism, is also so fun to look at and can be so cutesy at the same time as being, dark and dramatic and glum. This one it starts off with this little girl who has grown up entirely inside of one room inside of this horrific 500,000 person city, prison, and just so happens that there's some prisoners planning an escape who live in the room next to her, and they've been keeping her and her new baby brother alive by leaving them food on the doorstep, but not being aware of, like, who's in the room, thinking that maybe there were still parents in there, but the mom left, like, right after the newborn was born, assumed dead, so it's just these kids. And, when these other guys launch their escape, the kids end up shackling onto it. The girl, like, rides on the guy's back with the baby in tow. But as they're escaping, she gets shot in the arm, does not let go of her baby brother after getting shot. But they all fall down. Like, she drops him on the wrong side. They fall on the other side. But everybody survives the fall into the snow. So she's like, maybe my baby brother is still alive. So this badass colonel who escaped with the little girl raises her for the next 11 years to become the ultimate hard-ass fucking knife-wielding warrior to go back into the prison and retrieve her younger brother. This story gets completely insane. It is very grimdark, very violent, but very fun. It's a light, brisk read. It covers a ton of ground in 3 volumes. Like, this could easily be adapted into a 13-episode anime, and it would feel, like, really tight and complete, and you might even have to add, like, a little bit into it to get it out to 13 episodes, but, like, it's got that just right of establishing characters, establishing a world, telling a complete story, having all these fun beats that compel you to completion. It's got a pretty solid villain. It's got some cool-ass fights, crazy character designs. Another one I don't want to spoil too much of because it's such a thrill ride. But I highly recommend reading both of these manga from Moriya Shiro, who I think is just one of the manga artists I'm most excited about now. They have another one-shot that's in Jump Plus that has not been translated as far as I know. That's like 65 pages long, and I would really love for that to be translated because I want to read it. And if somebody wants to translate that and needs somebody to proofread it, I would be more than down to do that. So after the excitement I felt at Astro Baby, I went and just started opening random stuff, anything that's like still going, especially if it's in Shonen Jump Plus. I was very curious about other like popular series running in that online publication, and that led me to Dandadan, which has 141 chapters, so I have by no means caught up. Actually, I only read the first 3, but they were very, very entertaining. This is a manga I feel like I can show you some spoilers, because it would be hard to spoil this in a way that, like, just non-stop insane stuff is happening in this manga. By the end of the first chapter here, which I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, like, wow, this feels way more normal than I remember it feeling at the start. Like, part of it's because, like is the case with Astro Baby, most of the dialogue, what the characters are actually saying, is interesting. Even though, like, it's in a relatively normal scenario, the characters aren't normal. And so that makes them fun to read, fun to see their interactions before the situation starts to become abnormal around them. And so you've got this sort of, these characters who, while not normal, are relatable. And the totally alien threat that is abducting them. This one's definitely got some hypersexual tendencies. I posted this image on Twitter because this was just too perfect. The aliens going, "We will now perform the sex act. After performing sex with you, we will extract your womb and banana organs for our research." This is, I mean, if you need to know what the energy of this manga is, it's encapsulated, I think, in that batch of pages. But the main guy has, like, this old demon woman, like, possessing him, this weird old perverted woman that gives him, like, the power to whip around and do crazy fast stuff. When you go from the kind of sketchy looking character designs, like the way that they're drawn is almost less, like, fully realized than the creepy aliens and stuff. Like, this looks like a real ass design. Such a good fucking design. And the old lady thing too. Like, the monster designs are really what make this so fucking cool to me. I already liked the characters, like, right off the bat. I thought they were fun. I think he did a great job establishing them. But then getting into these action scenes, seeing just how wild the designs of the monsters and stuff are and the powers. And it's just a super fun read. Every page is so dynamic. The way the characters move, just the fucking wild imagery. Yeah, this is one that I didn't feel a need to rush in catching up on this because it's not over. So if I catch up, I'm just going to be in the boat of, stuck reading it week to week. Whereas I'm excited because the Astro Baby manga is brand new, so it's like I'll be able to keep up with it every step of the way. This is like I'm, kind of bandwagon jumping on something, but I'll probably try to catch up with it before the anime series, because this has an anime coming this fall from, of all things, Studio Science Saru, the studio, created by Masaaki Yuasa, who's always done weird experimental shows with cool visuals. I'm very excited to see what their take on this manga will be. It feels right for Science Saru to be the ones handling this. So that's always exciting to me when, like, that the studio is the studio you would want to do that story. And that's definitely the feel with Dandadan. So, I'm sure some of you already know this manga, have already read all of it. But if you're not familiar, this is what it is, and I think it's pretty cool. Here's another one that's just sort of gotten started. It's only got 3 chapters translated into English. Genkaku Shijuu Soudan. This I highly recommend to anybody who's a fan of Nisio Isin and the Monogatari series. Just any of that stuff that's mostly about 2 characters having really long-winded dialogues, and one of them is like a fairly normal, rational person, and the other one is absolutely on a different planet mentally. This is the most new type manga, if you remember my old neurotyping chart videos, the most, like, impressionistic thinking. The presentation of the story is pretty straightforward. It's mostly just conversations between these 2 girls in this really cutesy art style, but the conversations themselves are far-reaching, nebulous sort of thought clouds, where this teacher, who the pupil is hoping to take over this teacher's position. She's like, I'm just going to study under this woman, find out whatever she knows, and when she's dead, I'll have her spot, or when she retires, And everything the woman says is basically schizo black pills about the way the world truly is. And so the first chapter being about witches and what her perspective is on witches and how their iconography pervades all of culture, and, like, doesn't have a conclusion None of the chapters does she ever really like make a point. She just kind of thought dumps about a subject and then moves on. It's very like again, impressionistic blog posting, but through the form of comics and like a conversation that makes it somewhat digestible, as opposed to just somebody saying these things at you. But it does feel like the manga author is just thought dumping pretty much. They have other series that are very similar. There's one, I don't remember the title of it. Somebody told me it was one of their favorite manga, so I checked it out. It has 3 volumes. It's Maria something. I'm trying to remember. In any case, this author's other manga was about like a girl in high school who's in the literature club, and like the boy who's with her. It's even more Monogatari is basically what I'm getting at, is like it's like a teen version of this with more of a romantic subplot edge. And that was less appealing to me, maybe because it's a hetero couple, maybe because the romantic subtext just wasn't as, like, I don't know, it's not what I'm looking for in a relationship, I guess, so I don't feel that kind of, this is my waifu, and this is the dating I wish I was doing, or whatever. This is more, to me, like, the self-insert, particularly the woman in this manga, where she's just kind of ranting at her student about all of the thoughts in her mind. So this was a more relatable one to me, but all of their manga seem to be this type of thing. So if this intrigues you, you should definitely read it. It's very get out of my head type writing. This one's probably going to make some people mad on principle alone, but I was surprised how much I enjoyed this Marvel manga that is not what it probably looks like just going by the start. This is Spider-Man Octopus Girl, which is a spiritual sequel to Superior Spider-Man, or it's set within that continuity in which Dr. Octopus had implanted his consciousness into Spider-Man as a way of like saving himself from near death. And I guess that's become a thing he just does now. Like post that arc, now whenever he's about to die, he'll do this. In this version of the story, he's got this like lolly AI that decides to put his brain into a little Japanese girl because that's what was available. And as he's going into her consciousness, he gains all her memories and is like, I guess she was like also about to die. She was like in a coma, so she was hooked up to a brain scan machine, and that's why her brain was accessible. But yeah, so Dr. Otto Octavius is now inside the brain of this cute little middle school girl. And of course it turns out she's being bullied at school. She's got like, abuse at home. Like her life situation's not that great. So he starts turning it around by being, an unstoppable criminal force. But as this manga goes, it is more of a hero. It's basically an Otto Octavius, like, it's more focused on the good traits, definitely, but also presenting this character as like a narcissistic villain who is, out for themselves, but through the communication with, the girl whose body is hosting him, he comes to end up kind of circumstantially doing things for her, and putting himself in more heroic circumstances. But as this goes on, the main villain of the story ends up being another Otto Octavius from another universe, the Superior Octopus, which is, I guess, at some point in the comics, I haven't read all of this Spider-Man, so this is for me more like, I'm learning what the fuck happened in the last 5-10 years of Spider-Man by way of it all getting referenced in this side story about Octopus being in this little girl's brain. It's fucking adorable. It's really fun. It's good. It's well written. It's well drawn. The action scenes are good. It feels exactly like a combination of a Spider-Man comic and a manga. And it's just really fucking fun, especially seeing, like, once Otto cuts her hair, it just like becomes literally Lolly Doc Ock. Yeah, this manga is it's a blast, and I think it has, Yeah, it's got 13 chapters right now. I don't know how long this is going to go. It feels like it's already probably nearing conclusion, and I especially say this because this was just created as a promotional for the Marvels. There's a like chapter 8.5 that's literally just an ad for the Marvels drawn by the comic author. So yeah, that's why this exists, and it's so much better than that. I love, one of the things I love about gigantic pieces of media, like just these stupid, ridiculous, insane budget things, is that in the attempt to make that thing work, they will often pour money into all these other weird places where somebody will do something cool. You know, like somewhere along the line, some manga artist is like, what? You want me to make a girl-oriented Spider-Man comic manga, you know, for Shonen Jump because of this Marvel's movie, and all I have to do is like draw an ad for it at some point? Sure, you know, but the manga has so much heart and is so much fun, and it draws so much from the lore of Spider-Man. There's a Sakura Spider is a character in this who I guess was introduced through a Deadpool manga from like 4 years ago, where, you know, Deadpool was in Japan. It was some kind of Deadpool samurai thing, and there was Sakura Spider, and now she's in this manga fighting with Doc Ock against Superior. It's legitimately a part of the Spider-Man canon. It feels right. But it's cute and it's fun and it's for me. So yeah, this is like a Spider-Man story made for me, and I'm very happy that it exists. I really sampled like a shit ton of manga in the last few days, a lot of which I couldn't even make it a few pages into. Some of them I read the first chapter and I thought it was good, but I knew that there was no way the story could continue and be like as interesting as that, and usually I would give up like during the second chapter. And a lot of it is that I've started storyboarding comics. I recently completed a 22-page storyboard. I'm not going to talk too much about it yet because I would rather that more of the finished art was done that I could show people before I talk about this story. I don't want people to get mental images in their head of what it is, you know? But I drew a storyboard, and in the process of doing that, I came to appreciate a lot about comic writing, about the difficulties of doing it, and also how to overcome those difficulties. And what I see as the biggest issue in most of the manga that I've tried to read is authors feel this need to like establish a sense of normalcy by having their characters like at home talking to their friends, just having like casual conversations, and then they kind of break away from that into the intrigue later on. And all of the best manga that I've read, like I talked about this especially with Astro Baby and with Dandadan. Going back to them, I was surprised how normal looking the stories are at the beginning, because the dialogue is really interesting. It's very compelling. Whereas, you know, Soloist in the Cage, the first image is Prison City. So right away there's this, you know, the setting is the draw, and then you get into the characters and the artwork, and that all draws you in, and it just becomes a fulfilling story. But, you know, with those other manga, with Dandadan, for instance, it was fairly normal scenarios, except that the characters have such an expressive way of communicating and feel so individual that they're immediately stand out. And so you want to see what's going to happen with them, and when what happens is really interesting, then you keep going. And so with each of these manga, you know, the question on my mind is always like, well, how are you going to keep that interesting, image for image, page for page, chapter for chapter, going forward? And I personally prefer when manga is not trying to be as long as humanly possible. One of the big problems I have with Shaman King as I've been reading it is that there are pockets of it that are just really good, where there's clearly like a strong idea and strong execution of that idea. And then there's parts where it feels like, all right, we have to come up with a chapter every fucking week. Let's have some Buddhist monks show up and like play music at our heroes for a couple chapters. There's some pockets of Shaman King that are very forgettable, very uninteresting. But I liked enough of the early stuff, and I see where it gets good enough that I'm like compelled to read through even those parts. And I'm willing to be more forgiving with something that I really like. But sometimes you don't have to be. And this is a manga that I was recommended through Twitter. Not even really recommended. I just kind of asked, like, hey, what's the most recent anime or manga you got excited about? And one of the responses was Kentou Ankokuden Cestus. They said, I picked this up and I had to blitz through all of it immediately. I don't have that kind of reading speed. It's 15 volumes. I'm a little scared of trying to read this all nonstop. But I gotta say, this is the most compelling manga story I've read in a long time. It started in 1997, I think. So I'm surprised I've never heard of this. It recently had an anime adaptation that apparently stripped out a lot of the story. People are not very happy with it. So, I'm not even going to bother checking that out. The manga, it looks incredible, and the story is really good, and I was shocked to realize that this is from the same author as Blaster Knuckle, which is a manga that I've recommended since way back. Blaster Knuckle was about a black guy in the American South murdering KKK members who are actually demons with a shotgun glove. It was fucking badass. It's 3 volumes. It's very Berserk-esque. Cestus feels so much more unique, has so much more of its own identity, and it goes super deep on its historical context, where Blaster Knuckle was really fun that it was set in the American South, and it did it very well. Like, it felt believable, considering it's a Japanese person writing it. For me as an American, I never felt like, oh, this person didn't do their research, like, considering that it's mostly like a fun demon slaying story. It's surprising how much research must have been done to make that story work. Cestus much more takes itself seriously, and it's set in Roman times. The main character is a slave boxer, and the story is fucking brutal. Like, we're talking Game of Thrones level of historical accuracy to the insane violence and darkness that humans lived with. Continue to live with. But the specific barbarisms of the era are what are being analyzed in this story. And the first chapter, Cestus, he's got this friend, this cool older guy that he looks up to, that he ends up beating in a test fight, and thinking it was all good fun, immediately has that guy murdered in front of him, and realizes, oh shit, the people we work for are just going to grind us all through. Like, this is what we exist to do, is to fight until we die for other people's amusement. It's pretty fucking intense. You really, you struggle to get attached to these characters because that they're probably going to die, but it's so well written, and they're so compelling and expressive and likable that you can't help but do it anyways. It's one of those stories where you're just like, oh man, I know this is going to hurt, I know this is going to be painful, but it's just so good. It's so well written, and again, it's that panel for panel, page for page, it's always telling a story. It's always saying something new. It's always, like, compelling the characters a bit further, and, like, it starts off feeling a little bit more broad, I guess, where, like, you only know a little bit about the characters and about their world as you go into it, but it gets super in-depth, where I think I'm on volume 3 only, and I already feel like I know more about these characters than I do about shows that I've seen in their entirety, there's just so much nuance going on in the writing. Yeah, this is just, like, to me, a classic. This is one of those things I start reading it and I'm like, well, I know this is good. Because I'm 2 volumes in and it's been, like, consistently as good as the first chapter the whole time, I see no reason to think it won't be consistently good for all 15 volumes. And there's a whole sequel manga. So, this is another one I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this podcast, if you're manga fans, you might already know this series. You might already be a fan. But I love it. I love how twinky the main character is. How he's just this cute little crybaby who's drawn like super girly all the time, and then beats the shit out of these massive, like monstrous, ugly, big old, Roman fighters. Everybody's fate is dark. Everything sucks. But you've got like, historical figures like Nero, where like Nero, the Roman emperor, is one of the main characters because he's like, enthralled by Cestus and his abilities as this small guy his own age who's kicking everybody's ass. So, yeah, the story goes in lots of interesting directions. It's not necessarily anything new. I mean, it is historical. It is, again, very similar to like a Game of Thrones type of energy, but it's way more concentrated. It's not trying to bounce around like this massive cast. It's got a decently sized cast, but they're all so fleshed out that like I could think of 6 or 7 characters that I could tell you, a page of about them, which again is not something I can say for tons of manga characters. So this is very compelling. And I'll be talking more about any of those manga that I'm not done with, any of the ones that are completed as I go through them. I'll talk about them on each episode of this podcast. This is, I decided to do this sort of loose structure because I've always had a difficult time figuring out how to cover manga on YouTube because of the way that it's released and the way that I tend to read it. Every manga releases at a different rate, whether it's in a monthly magazine, a weekly magazine, quarterly, whatever, if it's on hiatus all the time. So it's difficult to do it in like I'm going to keep up with each new chapter as it releases. Also, it comes out in Japanese and then has to be translated. So unless it's through an official, consistent source, lots of stuff also gets dropped. There's people who only read physical manga, people who only read manga online. So in the past, when I was more buying lots of manga, I used to talk about them volume by volume, which made it difficult to communicate with people who aren't keeping up with it that way. And also, how do you talk about a series you're not done with? How do you talk about a 15-volume manga that you haven't read all of? So I figured this kind of loose structure that more reflects the way I actually read manga would be better for discussing it. And there's probably like 45 manga that I sampled in the process of getting to just the 6 that I just was compelled enough to either finish or decide that I'm going to keep reading. There were only a few that I did finish, one of them being Soloist in a Cage, which I absolutely love. I wish it had a physical release, because 7 Seas released it through Kindle. I don't think there's a physical version, but I would love to own one, because that's one of those manga I could see reading, again and again and showing people and stuff over the years. But before I leave you, I want to read you the most frustrating manga I've ever read. This is the worst thing ever. It's called It Shouldn't Have Turned Out Like This, Thought the Femboy. It's only 6 pages. Basically, this kid dresses up like a girl because his friend said that he would probably look good if he did. And the friend's like, oh, shit, did I say that? Well, I don't remember that. And so he's all embarrassed. And then the guy's like, shit, I totally did tell him to do that. But I don't want to admit that I'm into it. So, and then it just ends with the one guy being like, wow, can't let my friend know I'm gay. And the other friend going, I'm never going to cross-dress again. And that's it. That's where this ends. You've got the beginnings of a compelling story about these two realizing something about themselves. And it ends with them going deep into the closet. This is literally a manga about going back in the closet. It was very upsetting. So anyway, I had to frustrate you here right at the end. I experienced this, so you have to too. Let me know about any manga that you want to hear me talk about on this show in the comments. What do you think I need to read? Maybe you have a decent grasp of my taste based on what I talked about here. Anything that's not like this, the things I showed, not this one that's on screen. Anything that's not like the stuff I showed, probably not as interesting to me. But if it is like the stuff I showed, probably interesting. Or if it's just good, I'm interested in reading Kagurabachi. I know that's like the big manga right now. So I'll probably try to check that out before the next show. It's only 21 chapters, so it shouldn't be too hard to catch up on. I've noticed Shonen Jump has apparently canceled everything continually for the last 2 years. They've just got like 3 or 4 manga that are like long running, and the rest of it's dead. So maybe I'll check out some of that new stuff if any of it's good. Let me know. Let me know what you want to see. In case you missed it, my anime analysis series has begun here on the We Watch Anime channel. The first of 24 videos that I've written, which will be released bi-weekly for the rest of the year, called Heroic Antagonists in Anime, is out now. And if you want to get access to my next anime analysis video, Anime with Personality, a week before it is made public, of course, anybody who gives me $5 a month on Patreon, $1 a month on Backed.by, or is subscribed to my Substack, will get access to that video early. For $7 on Substack, $5 on Backed By, or $10 on Patreon, you could also have your name at the start of every single one of those videos. And for $15 on Patreon or $10 on Backed.by, you will also get access to the We Read Manga podcast, which is similar to this, except that I'm not going through a bunch of random chapters of manga that I read this week. Instead, it is me and my fiance Bird Stork going volume by volume through 5, and soon it will be 6 classic manga, including Berserk, Vinland Saga, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 7, Vagabond, and Land of the Lustrous. So if you want to hear us talk about those manga volume by volume, you can go sign up for that highest tier on our Patreon. Thanks again for listening, and manga forever.